So we're going to do now to go to chapter 3 of Ruth and to review very briefly what we had. We've seen in the first chapter, we saw the prominence of the movement verbs to come, to go, to return. And that was really the theme of where are you going to, where are you returning to. And those verbs played a role again in the second chapter where she comes and she stands in the field, she goes back home. What does she take with her to the field, etc.? From the field home, we saw the importance of the words of location, the house, the field, the Bethlehem, the house of bread, the field of Moab. Those are the important key words in terms of location. But we also got a glimpse into Naomi's personality. We don't know much about her, but from the name we know the Naomi symbolically means pleasant. Ruth, we don't know yet the meaning of. Mahlon and Chilion, her children, have tragic names, disease and death. Elimelech is the name that conveys power, strength, king. And we're starting to get the feeling, that's what we spoke about in chapter 2, that Ruth is aware of a special quality of Naomi, and she's trying to bring her back. She's literally bringing her back from the dead, because she's emotionally or spiritually dead. She stays home, she locks herself in, she doesn't want to come out. She says, God has struck out against me, God singled me out, I don't know why, I haven't done anything wrong. I went full, God brought me back empty. And we saw this contradiction between I went, God brought me back. I went full, God brought me back empty. I'm not in control of my actions. She comes back to Bethlehem, she's confronted by all these caring people who say, oh, it's you, we cannot believe that you are Naomi. And she says, no, I'm not, I'm Mara, I'm bitter. She changes her name, changes her identity. She goes home and she locks herself in. And Ruth is the one who says, can I go and get some food? She says, go. And if I read into that as the tone of desperation, despair, I don't think that anything good is going to come out of it. But Ruth is plotting there. She's manipulative, but in a good way. She tries to get as much done without putting herself in center stage. And her objective is to make Naomi believe that she is the one who initiated everything. So she comes and goes into the fields, trying to figure out where Boaz, who is the relative, where does he work, which one is his field, and she finds it. She tells the boy who is in charge of the reapers, can I also join the field behind them and glean whatever I can? And he says yes. And she makes this request in order to make herself known and stand out. Then, when they glean in the field, she stands still. She doesn't collect much. And she's again singled out by being passive. When they sit to eat, Boaz says, you could eat with my girls. And she says, thank you, but she doesn't eat. So he comes and serves her, which is a very intimate act. Also erases the differences of status between a maidservant or a sojourner and a landowner and an important person, and that is how Ruth manages to position herself above everyone else. She gleans so much, and she brings prepared food to her mother-in-law to the house, and she pretends that she thinks it's regular. It's a normal thing. So she lets Naomi make the discovery. She says, wow, how much food did you bring? Where did you work today? After she eats. And she says, oh, by that guy named Boaz. She says, Boaz, I cannot believe it. He's a relative. He's one of us. This is God's hand. And this is an amazing paradigm shift for Naomi, because just, shortly before that we read that she says, God's hand was against me. God wants to punish me, and now he says God loves me. So she manages to bring her from the brink of extinction to that place where she believes that she still has hope. So Ruth is smiling inside, but pretends to be completely unaware of what was going on in the field. So now, we come to chapter 3, and in chapter 3 we read this. Let's read the text and see what happens here. Remember, she went back home. Last thing. With this, we saw like a subtle change that Ruth makes, which could almost go unnoticed, but we understand that she does it deliberately, where Boaz says, stick with my girls, meaning he wants to be protective of her, and he already marks her as a possible wife for him. That's why he doesn't want her to be with the boys. When Ruth reports this to Naomi, she says, in verse 21, he said, cling to my young men, stick with them. And Naomi answers, it is good that you go out with his maidens. So, even though she didn't know what Boaz says, she says, no, it's not good for you to be with the boys. Meaning, in other words, I don't want you to hook up with one of the boys and get married to him. This is not going to work for us. I need you to marry Boaz. She doesn't say that, but she thinks that. And Ruth knows very well that that's what she thinks, but she plays this game of being innocent, completely unaware of the whole thing. Just by throwing this word, he wanted me to stick with the boys, she revealed Naomi's thoughts for her, yes. So she does keep with the maidens of Boaz, and then at the end, what does she do? Verse 23 of chapter 2. Vateshev et hamuta. She dwelt with her mother-in-law. So she goes back to being static and passive. She sits home, she returns. The vateshev in Hebrew, she dwelt, also means she went back. So she says, now I belong to you, I belong to Naomi. Naomi also accepts it. But Ruth ends up this whole story, this whole chapter in her life, in being passive. So now, what happens in chapter 3? Who would like to read the first, I guess, 4 verses? Who would read that?
I can.
Okay.
So the first 4?
Yeah.
Okay. And Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, my daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And now there is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maidens you were. Behold, he winnows barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself therefore, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment upon thee, and get thee down to the threshing floor. But make not thyself known unto the man until he have done eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lieth down, that you shall mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in and uncover his feet, and lay thee down, and he will tell thee what thou shalt do.
Okay. So, how do you understand this whole monologue? Like what she tells Ruth to do. What is the purpose of that? How do we understand in the biblical context of maybe the relations between men and women? How does it look?
Forward.
Well, she wants her to be subtle, right? But definitely have the agenda of getting intimate.
Yeah. Yes, the subtlety. It's hard to see the subtlety, no.
It's pretty. She's telling her put him in a compromised position.
So you think she wants to frame him and
kind of, yeah. Oh, look, you ended up, because isn't there some significance to uncovering the feet that has some meaning?
We don't know exactly what it means, right?
So it's like, oh, he ended. He'll wake up and she's in his bed and he thinks,
right,
he's done something.
Oh yeah, that's a possibility that he will think that right. If he ate and drank, right,
got to make it good.
Right. And what do we think? Even in our modern liberated, egalitarian society, right? What do we think of a girl that calls her boyfriend to know, that she offers him to get married, or she calls him to know if they should keep on together. She's courting him. It is still frowned upon, right?
Kind of.
People will tell her it's not about being proactive. It's just don't look desperate, right? Mm-hmm. He should be the one courting you. So, but here I think it seems like Naomi doesn't care. She is desperate. She's she says, when she says this to Ruth, she basically says, seize the opportunity. You have this man, he showed favor to you, and it's God's hand. And when God shows us a path, we walk that path, right? And but look at let's look at the words in Hebrew and see the subtleties there, because you see that the text is interconnected. Naomi says, I shall seek rest for you. This is I not seek rest for you? So the word rest, manoah, right? We've seen it before. In the first, where was it? Sorry. The first chapter, verse 9. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband. See how beautifully this whole book goes in circles. And like Ruth clings to Naomi in the beginning, and then she's rewarded with being told, cling to my maidens, right? Here, Naomi in the very beginning said, you should find rest, each in the house of her husband. And in the Hebrew is metzena menuha. And this is chapter 1, verse 9. But when we go to chapter 3, she says, I'm looking for a rest place for you. It's a little different. Manoah is in the masculine, menuha is in the feminine. Which, if we take into account the default setting of the Hebrew language, that the masculine is sort of more important or more powerful, than when Naomi wished for them to find rest, she said it in the feminine, which is weakened, like some kind of rest. But now she says it in the masculine, in a way that she feels very, very convinced that this is her place. Also, this word, asher yitav lach. Yitav is from the word in Hebrew, tov, well. And what?
That it will go well with you.
Yeah, it will go well, but it comes from the word good. Tov literally means good. And if we go back to when she speaks about what God did to her in 2:21, she says, Shaddai hera'ali, God has afflicted me. But the word hera is derived from the direct opposite of good, ra. So Naomi before says, you can find rest in your whomever your husband shall be. Now she says, no, I know who your husband is. There you go, Boaz is yours. Before she says, God did evil with me, ra. Now she says, God is good with me. Asher yitav lach, right? It is good. Not only that, next verse. Halo Boaz modatanu. Boaz is our kinsman, meaning the one that we know. And see previously in verse 1 of chapter 2, or Naomi, Moda' Lisha, a kinsman, someone that she knows. And here again, it's like the reverse dynamics that we see with the word menuha from masculine to feminine. Moda is in the masculine. Moda'tanu is almost saying relative in the feminine. But this is, here it's positive to be in the feminine, because when the moda, the relationship was in the masculine, it is something which could be devoid of emotions. Men are less sensitive to the I'm not talking about being emotional in the vernacular sense of the word, but rather in reality, psychological studies have proven that men are less capable of creating circles of friendships around them, circles of relationships. Are you aware of that? Am I? It sounds like okay. The way that the experiment was conducted, you could do it at home. It's very easy. You could identify your friends to see how well they're willing to create friendship circles. You draw a bullseye with 3 or 4 circles, and you put the name of your friend in the middle. You give it to them, and you say, you could put 10 names in those circles, the closest to you in the center, and then go, to the outer rings. What would happen usually with women? Let's start with men. Men would usually put in the center themselves and their spouse. In the second circle, maybe children and parents, and then 1 or 2 friends in the third ring. Women would put almost all 10 names in the center, and then whatever is left in the second ring, and they would ask, could we add more names? So when Boaz is described as a moda, he has this kind of there's a barrier there. It's hard to get to him. Now that he's a moda'tanu, he's a kinsman, but in the feminine, there's a greater chance to get closer to him because he appreciates more relationships. Then you were with his girls, meaning as I wanted you and as he wanted you to be with his girls and not with his boys. This is the recurring motive here. Now, he is winnowing the barley tonight in the threshing floor. So, winnows is a term that I don't think most people use today in English, right? I mean, we know it in context. What it means to winnow is to throw, the way they would filter the chaff, separate the chaff from the grain, was to throw it in the air, and the wind blows away the chaff, and the heavier grains fall to the ground. So you do it outside, and the question is that we should ask. No, maybe let me ask you. What is the question that you would ask on this verse? This is sort of maybe not a textual question, but more a context. It's like, read this. He is winnowing the barley tonight in the threshing floor. If you just read this sentence, and you know that someone, or we know Boaz, is in his field winnowing the barley at night, what question would you raise on that text, on that story?
Why in the world is he doing that? And why does she know about it?
Good. So why does she know? How does she know about that?
But also,
which, by the way,
in his position, why would he be doing that? And from what you just said, why would he be doing it indoors?
No, it should be outside. It has to be outside. So in the threshing floor is outside the granary.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe it's inside and he's just doing a small quantity. But you brought up a good point that really didn't occur to me. How does she know that? How does Naomi know that? That's a very good point. So why is he doing it at night? And why is he doing it alone? He's a landlord, and he has sharecroppers and workers. Why are they not doing it?
Yeah. What's he trying to prove by doing this?
Right. So what's the point there?
I think he's trying to be in the place where Ruth's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you think it's coordinated? You think Naomi coordinated that? She says...
No, I think that he wants to be where he knows Ruth is going to be.
But how does he know that Ruth is going to be there?
If there's something going on with the harvest, that's presumably she's there helping.
No, she's not supposed to be there at night. The night is for winnowing. But maybe I thought you were suggesting, like maybe Abby was saying, maybe the Boaz and Naomi are conspiring here to do something. We don't know. That's a possibility. Or Naomi says to Boaz, she sent a message, you should be in the threshing floor tonight. And then she says to Ruth, you should be in the right? That's a possibility. There's another possibility, and that is this is not something that we could really call from biblical literature, but we know from post-biblical literature that the first gathering of the grain into the barn or into the granary was considered a sign of blessing. And actually, we do have it in the Bible where the Torah says several times, "Yetzav Adonai itchata beracha ba'asamecha." May God bless you or bequeath you with blessing in your granaries. This is in. I don't want to switch a page online. This is in Parashat Kitavo. It's 1 second. It's verse 8 of chapter 28 of Deuteronomy. The Torah says there, the Lord will will ordain blessings for you upon your barns and upon all your undertakings. In Talmudic literature, the rabbis say when you go to measure or to count the grains in your granary, you should say a blessing beforehand, and then maybe it will multiply. Because once you count it, once you measure it, it's not going to be blessed anymore. And they also say that the word asam, granary in Hebrew, comes from the word samui, hidden, even though it's not a true etymology. Because asam is a biblical word and samui or suma is a rabbinical word, but it shows that they had this belief that your first dough or your first grain is a blessing, and it should be hidden from others. It's almost like people today who believe in evil eye, so they don't reveal everything. So maybe this is a possibility that the landowners would do it themselves, at least the first round, so that there would be blessing in the granaries. And if that is the case, then we could maybe but we could survive without the theory of conspiracy, because all the landlords, there was maybe a date where everybody would go to the fields and do that, and then sleep there, and in this way establish ownership and establish the blessing that they deserve. Maybe also there's a hidden innuendo or metaphor there, and that is that throwing the barley in the air is sort of an analogy to spreading one seed. In many cases, in the Torah, there's an analogy between having many children and having abundant fields. Even in the English, we use the term fertile soil and fertility, and the similarity between the human seed that grows and being born as a baby, and between the seed that's planted in the ground and develops into a tree, was not lost on, definitely not on the ancient forefathers who were farmers. So now in verse 3, she says, wash and anoint yourself, put your raiment upon thee, meaning your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor. Al tivad'i la'ish. Do not become known to the men. And you see it's the same verb that is lost in translation as Boaz moda'atanu, the one that we know. It translates as kinsman, but it's the one that we know. So she says, and remember that in verse 10 of chapter 2, she says, why have I found favor in your sight to recognize me? And he says, I recognize you because you left your nation and you went to a nation that you did not know. So she was unknown to people. She came to an unknown nation. She finds a known man, someone who's known to the family. And now Naomi says, I want you to take the final step and make yourself known to him, which obviously in the Tanakh, in the Bible, carries a much more intimate meaning. It's not just make yourself known, here I am, but rather it means sexual relationships. So Ruth basically suggests that Ruth will become very intimate with Boaz, to sleep with him, if that is. And she says, "V'hi b'shuchvo," when he lies down, you should know the place where he lies down. Again, the word to know. Uvad v'gilit margelotav, uncover his feet and lay down, and he'll tell you what to do. So it's not clear whether she tells her to be with him or to be next to him, or like Donna said, she said, put him in a compromised situation, right? Bring the cameras and send him the negative, send him one set. I have other copies sent to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, etc., right? And blackmail him. But that's okay. That's what Naomi's plan is, and she's very. It seems that she's determined. She's what is Ruth's response? Abby, you want to read the next 4 verses?
Sure. And she said unto her, all that thou sayest unto me I will do. And she went down unto the threshing floor, and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly, and uncovered his feet, and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight, that the man was startled, and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet.
Okay. So, here, it seems the narrative is pretty clear, right? Except again for this fact of lying at his feet. We don't know how intimate is this. But look at the interesting exchange here in verse 5. ותאמר אליה, כל אשר תאמרי אעשה. The word Eli, to me, is read but not written. Let's look at the text. The word, you see the word Eli in parenthesis? There are like 2 more words like that in the Bible, where the word is not written but it's read. It's almost, either it's in later edition, or the author deliberately says, we don't write that word. What is the symbolism of not writing the word to me? Of making it like a hidden word? What do you think?
It makes it vaguer whether they're really, quote, conspiring together or planning together.
Right? Is she part of it or not?
Yeah, it's less direct, kind of like, oh, whatever you happen to be saying there. Oh yeah, I'm going to do that.
So you see this as conspiracy. What is another possibility of
to cover up conspiracy?
Okay. it could also be seen as a complete obedience, and her answer is very concise. Whatever you say, I'll do. Meaning, you are the leader, I'm just following. And maybe that's why the word Elai is hidden to me. Meaning, me, I'm not here. I'm a non-entity. I'm just working for you or fulfilling your wishes. And then the author does drive that point with the next verse. She went down to the threshing hole and did everything according to what her mother-in-law bade her. So then Boaz eats and drinks. Vayitav libo. You see the word vayitav? Again we see it. Vayitav in English is his heart was merry. In Hebrew, his heart was good. It's the same word that she says earlier. I look for you for a rest that will be well with you. Yitav lach. So Boaz is now in that place where it's good, and he comes to sleep at the end of the heap of grain. Vatavo balat, and balat doesn't mean softly. It means in hiding, and that is typical for Ruth because so far she's been working in hiding. Actually, this word is combined from the word ba, in, and lat, which means covered. So she's covered. Nobody recognizes her. She's wrapped, which is even more symbolic in the whole context of Ruth, not being seen, not being heard, and being passive. But the word which is juxtaposed to balat, to be covered, to be wrapped, is vategal. She uncovers, meaning she's now opening up the road to something new. And at midnight, he is startled. He turned himself. It's not clear what the Hebrew means. Lafat in Hebrew. One second. Lafat in Hebrew means to grasp with strength. So maybe it means that he was startled. When you wake up and you go like that and you hold yourself. But he is he's really surprised. Vayomer mi'at. He doesn't recognize her because it's dark. Vatomer. 1 second. And she says, Anochi Ruth amatecha, ufarasta kenafecha al amatecha igoel ata. So let's read this in the English. Donna, you want to read that?
Sure. And he said, Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art near kinsman. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter. Thou hast shown more kindness in the end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou dost not follow the young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou sayest. For all the men in the gate of my people do know that thou art a virtuous woman.
Okay. So, you know what? Let's read the next two verses.
Okay. And now it is true that I am a near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. But if he be not willing to do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee, as the Lord liveth. Lie down until the morning.
Lie down until the morning. Okay. So, just parsing the dialogue in terms of volume, what do we see here? I can't hear you well. No.
He does a lot of talking.
He does a lot of talking, right. So, the first one is like, who are you? She says, Anochi, Ruth amatecha. And notice like how her, probably she's practiced her answer. she wrote it down, like to memorize it when he asks her. She says, "It is I, Ruth." So first me, this is me, Ruth, your handmaid, meaning I know that I'm of a lower status, but I want you to spread your skirt over me, or your wing over me, because you are the kinsman, but also the redeemer. So she throws back at him a sentence that he said to her when she said, "Why do you care about me?" In chapter 2, verse 10, he answers, "The Lord will recompense your work, and you'll be rewarded by the Lord under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Now she says, I want you to take me under your wing and be my refuge. Or in other words, she says, you are God's representative. Right? So, what is his answer? So now his answer is long, is verbose. Why is that? Maybe he's just excited, right? He's happy. Either he did fall in love with her, or he had other reasons, but he really wanted this to happen. So his answer is really long in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it's 1, 24, 27, 35, 45, 7, 9, 51. Like, okay, we have about 65 words of an answer to her 10 words. He could have said, yes, great, I'll take care of it. Let's see what we're going to do tomorrow. Instead, he goes into a very long tirade. It means that he's excited and he was really looking forward to it. The Naomi maybe spoke to people and had some rumors. We don't know. But anyway, whatever she did, she succeeded here. But let's look at his language. He says, blessed are you by God, my daughter. So again, he returns to the term daughter, the endearment that he used before. But when he says, you are blessed by God, look, this is exactly what Naomi says about him. Naomi said to her daughter-in-law in 2:20, blessed be he of the Lord. So again, we see the cycle of how things tie together. Then he says, Heitavt hasdech ha'acharon min harishon. Your last kindness was greater than the first one. And here is what is the verb of this word heitavt in Hebrew? It is not at all to be found in the what?
Your goodness.
Right, you did good.
The
heitiv is the verb of good. You did good, or you did well. And he says, but literally means your last act of loving kindness was better and greater than the first one. But he uses again the verb tov that we've seen so many times before. And also he speaks about loving kindness, hasdech. And that is the word that Naomi uses in the beginning. And they said, you did kindness with the living and with the dead, now enough. But now this loving kindness comes back and says, no, I'm here to stay. And what was her first act of loving kindness? Leaving her homeland and following Naomi. He says, now you did this, you did even greater, the levilti lechet achara bahurim imdali mashir. Your first act of loving kindness was walking after a woman who was lonely and desolate. Now your kindness is not walking, again the term to walk, but not walking after the young boys, regardless of whether they're poor or rich. So he says, I know that a young boy has an advantage over me, even if he's poor, and even more so if he's rich. In other words, it says you were accessible or you were eligible to anyone in the city and you chose me. I'm honored by that. All right, I appreciate that. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that you say. Where is this sentence from?
Oh, she says the same thing to Naomi.
Right? Isn't it beautiful? Like, again, we have this kind of, reverberation of the text. Ruth says to Naomi, I'll do whatever you want, and her reward is, Boaz tells her, whatever you do, I will do for you. And this for you is important. He should not have said, I will do to you. But I will do. The to you is not necessary. But just like that, her personal identity was absent from the text here. Here, her personal identity is put there by Boaz, even though it's not necessary. He could have said, whatever you say, I'll do, but he said, I'll do to you, because he recognizes that she is proactive there. And he says, Ki yodea kol sha'ar ami ki eshet hayad, because all of the people of my gate, meaning at the gate, the judges would sit, they all know that you're a woman of valor, or a virtuous woman. And again, the verb here is yodea. It's about knowing. So we've seen this word in this chapter only. Boaz moda'atanu in verse 2. Al tivad'i in verse 3. Don't become known to him. Verse 4. Ve'yadat et hamakom, you should identify, know the place. And then in verse 11, Yodea kol sha'ar ami, they all know that you're a virtuous woman. He says, now it is true that I am a near kinsman, but there's someone closer than me, because they went by. It's interesting. It seems to be something along the lines of the Levirate law, but it's not. Because according to the Levirate law, the law of Yibum, the widow of the dead brother is married to the next brother. But here, anyone who's related can marry the widow. It goes like inheritance. So he says, if in the morning he will redeem you, it will be good. And if not, I will redeem you by the word of God. Shichvi ad boker. Stay here until the morning. Why? Again, we can assume that something went on between them, or that he was afraid for her safety if she walks back home at night. Again, we'll see in this verse 13, Im yigalech tov yigal. If he performed this part of a kinsman well, or in Hebrew, good. So again, this is another key word that appears in this chapter. So she lies down at his feet until the morning, and she gets up before one could discern another. And he says, let no one know that the woman came to the threshing floor. So again, we have the term lehakir, to know, to recognize, and the term yadoa, let it not be known, alivada, that she came here. He says, bring me the mantle that you're wearing, and hold it. And she held it, and he measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her, and he went into the city. And when she came into her mother-in-law, she said, who are you, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. So, or for her, it's more accurate. So he says, this, by the way, this story of the mantle with the 6 measures of barley took on mythical proportions in Kabbalistic literature. Because they say, why is it important that he gave her those 6? They understood stalks of barley. Why is it necessary? But the translation here is measures of barley. Why is it important? We don't really know. Maybe it was a symbolic thing. Maybe it was part of the dowry. But he goes separately, she goes separately. You see, he goes at the end of verse 15, she goes at the beginning of verse 16. It's still early, and she's not recognizable. And Naomi says, who are you, my daughter? And she says, this is what he did for me or to me. Okay, we have two more verses here. This is, as we said before, we don't really know what went on between Boaz and Ruth. But it's definitely a huge sacrifice on Ruth's part. True? I mean, we think of her as this, as now that we realize, let's go back and reflect on it. We think of her as this poor sojourner who comes from the fields of Moab. But now, by the way Boaz talks to her, we realize that her status has changed somewhat, right? He says, I appreciate the fact that you didn't go with the young men, whether rich or poor, meaning that she already had a standing among them. He also said, everybody knows that you're an Eshet Hayil, that you're a virtuous woman, meaning that as much as Ruth was trying to keep herself at low profile, word of her got out. So she could really have gotten and married anyone with enough possessions to support her, but she chose Boaz. So she says to Naomi, he gave me those 6 measures of barley, and he said to me, go not empty onto your mother-in-law. Now, here, al tavoi, you see the word lo lavo, not to come? This is our key word from first chapter. Lavo, to come, to go, to return. But look at the full text. Do not come empty-handed to your mother-in-law. What do we hear here from the previous chapters?
Naomi speaking of her emptiness.
Yes. She, right? What does she say here? Ani melea alachti verekam heshivani Adonai. I went full and God brought me back empty. And now, here's the counterpoint. The counterpoint is, you are not going to go back to her empty-handed. Her house is going to be full. So now she says, Vatomer shevi biti, sit still, my daughter. Sit still, לשבת, עד אשר תדעין, until you know how the matter will fall. You have to know how the matter is determined, because he will not rest until he would have finished this thing today. So Naomi interprets his actions as as being very active, very determined to get it done. And she says, right now you have to sit still and do nothing. And here again, the irony, this is what Ruth has done so far. She was sort of sitting still and doing nothing, but in that nothingness, sort of like by almost eliminating her identity or erasing it, she was able to bring Naomi to the forefront and to position herself in a place where she could be the wife of Boaz. Let's go to chapter 4. We have like 2 minutes for that. We'll just touch briefly on that.
I was interested in the question, the who are you, my daughter?
Yeah, why did she say that?
It's early in the morning. She doesn't know. She doesn't know who she is.
Well, I think that's a way of also asking, what happened? What's your relationship now to him, to me?
What's your status?
Right. Are you still my daughter, or you're already his wife, sort of, right? Maybe that. So she then, but also it's so I don't know who you are. So this whole thing goes between who are you? I don't know who you are, now I know who you are. And everybody knows. It's about knowing and not knowing. and maybe it's the ability to recognize our potential, and this is what Ruth did. She pulled that potential out of Naomi, and realized it and made it into a reality. So, and indeed, Boaz conducts this issue on his own. She's not even involved in the whole process of him redeeming the field. She doesn't have to be there, which, again, is not exactly the way the Levirate law is described in Deuteronomy, which makes us think that maybe either it's an ancient tradition that predated the Torah law and remained as such, or that it is really something that is just similar in or resembling in general lines the Levirate law, but it's not the Levirate law. In any case, but because in the Levirate law the woman has to go to the gate and summon her brother-in-law who refuses to marry her. In this case, he goes on his own and he sits there, and the Redeemer or the kinsman of whom Boaz spoke passes there. Vayomer Surah Shvapo Ploni Almoni Vayaso Vayeshev. And they translate, "Ho, such a one, turn aside, sit down here." Lashevet is like Lashuv, like he makes place for him at the gate. But interesting, how does he call him? Such a one. In Hebrew, it's, Ploni Almoni means just anyone. It's in Arabic, it's still used Flan al-Man. Joe Schmo, like whatever your name is. Hey you, whatever your name is, come over, sit here. But the funny thing, why is it not mentioning his name? Why is the name of the person omitted? That is part of this whole idea of who is known and who is unknown. This Ploni Almoni could be a very important man, but he becomes obsolete, he becomes unknown because he refuses eventually to redeem Naomi's field or share. So I think that's for today. We'll finish chapter 3 next week and move on to the next subject. But we see that so far Ruth is still consistent with her methodology, with her approach. She's trying to be passive and to get everything done. So everything around her, everyone around her is frantic, and she stands still. Just like that real scene in the field where she was standing still and all the other men and women were harvesting, here in her early life, she is sort of the same thing. She's the rock of Naomi. Okay, so we'll stop here.